Hi guys, take your notes so that you pass the exam. Bye guys.
What she said. And look, behold the death of liberalism. Bedtime for Bonzo. So, like we talked about, the economies of Western Europe and the United States revolved around having a large welfare state, having high employment, and also high taxation. And to be honest, you could afford all these things because the economies of the 1950s and 60s were actually pretty spectacular. Economically speaking, it is one of the best times to be alive. But all good things must come to an end. And in the 1970s, you see a series of economic recessions caused by an increase in the supply, in the price of oil, along with oil embargoes, which is what kind of causes the increase in the price of oil, and just general inflation. Also, in the United States especially, it's fighting to expand, or it's funding money to expand the welfare state in President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, while also fighting a very long and destructive war in Vietnam, and above all else, very costly. So, in other words, the old system seems to be not working. So in the 1980s, you have the emergence of neoliberalism. By the way, has nothing to do with American style liberalism. Think of liberalism as basically a return to free market capitalism. So Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, respectively the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of the UK, lead these policies. Of course, what's notable about Ronald Reagan is that Ronald Reagan himself is not an established politician. He was actually a union negotiator and as well as an Hollywood actor. I also associate Ronald Reagan specifically with a more aggressive and assertive approach to the Soviet Union. Under his leadership, détente kind of comes to an end, and Reagan pours a lot of money into funding weapon systems and just military spending in general. He criticizes the welfare programs, and with a couple of recessions aside, economic growth in the United States increases, although there is a notable increase in the wealth disparity in the country. The Soviet Union in vain tries to keep pace with American military spending, but it basically almost collapses in doing so. By the mid to late 1980s, the Soviet Union basically ends the Cold War with a series of arms limitation treaties with the United States, beginning with the Reykjavik summit. So by the early 1990s, the Cold War was basically over, and so begins what we call the Pax Americana, this period where the United States is the world's only superpower. Even though this is a time period where America reigns supreme, you also see the stirrings of something more in Western Europe. And to be honest, if you consider where we really begin the course, where European countries are basically just constantly destroying each other and bringing the rest of the world into their self-destructive tendencies, it's kind of remarkable that the idea of the European Union is ever put forth. And yet, nonetheless, that's exactly what happens. There's this sense that the European countries need to cooperate more if they're ever going to recover from the Second World War. So by 1958, you have West Germany and France specifically building economic partnerships over coal and steel. And eventually this partnership expands to Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. And this forms the European Economic Community. By 1993, this gets rebooted to the European Union, which consists of 28 member states today. The idea is that it fosters economic cooperation. Whether or not that extends to political cooperation is kind of TBD. So by 2001, the euro is the single currency for almost all European Union members, except for countries like Norway and Hungary. This has also basically led to an end with internal wars within Europe, again, as of 2026. Hope this comment ages well. You also see the abolition of border controls between EU countries, and you also have another political bloc other than the United States that promotes human rights internally and around the world. There is an attempt at what we call European federalism, the idea of unifying all of Europe under one government. Those attempts, however, have been less successful. So the European Union can basically be summarized as a confederacy, one in which countries retain their sovereignty but give power to a central government located in Brussels. For the United States and Western Europe, despite the omnipresent fear of total and utter and sudden nuclear annihilation, the economy was pretty good. It was a pretty decent time, again, economically speaking, to be alive. And in this war between communism and democracy and capitalism and socialism, democracy and capitalism seemed to win. So during this time period, to make up for the labor shortages caused by World War II, you see an influx in immigrant labor from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, especially in the case of former colonies. So, for example, France gets an influx of Moroccans and Algerians because those are where France's former colonies are. This also causes a significant backlash against immigration, which we're still basically dealing with today. This is also where people of at least your middle class can expect to own a television, refrigerator, car, etc. You also have this green revolution in which new seeds and new agricultural techniques increase agricultural yields, which helps bring over 1 billion people out of starvation. By the 1950s, you also have the discovery of DNA by Francis Crick and James Watson, and this also starts a renewed interest in genetics, X-rays, ultrasounds, and immunizations. The ending of the Cold War lowered many economic and political barriers, especially for immigration, and many immigrants from Eastern European countries, as well as just throughout the rest of the world, try to travel to places like Western Europe and the United States to take advantage of the higher standards of living. However, you see lots of immigrant discrimination, and you also see them occupy lots of low-wage employment, which is an issue that we're still dealing with even to this day. But as you can see, the world is increasingly becoming interconnected, both economically and politically. And we'll pick up our story with the emergence of our very globalized world at the end of history.